Welcome to the Architect of Resilience podcast, where we explore the secrets of overcoming life's challenges and unlocking unstoppable strength through deep personal conversations and expert insights.
I thought I'd do something a little different. So it's not exactly made up or anything. This is my shop.
It's perfect, dude.
So, speaking of, hobbies and things like that, I was wondering how the surfing was going for you. If you're able to get out.
Yeah, it's good. Definitely not as much as I would like to. That's for sure. I've got a little trip planned in April, and so I'm looking forward to that for sure.
Nice. Are you still close to the beach where you can get down pretty easy?
Yeah, I live 4 blocks from it.
Oh yeah.
But the schedule hasn't been right. For the last couple of years, I've been choosing to take my son to school as opposed to go hit the surf, which is, I think, it's definitely the right call.
Oh yeah.
But it's cost me some time in the water. But it's all good.
Well, it's like the project behind me. I started that. I was going to try to finish the first iteration of it before my son was born, and we're working on his driver's license now. So
that is so funny.
There's big gaps of not touching a project for 5 or 6 years, and then then I'm really into it.
That is too funny.
But that's life. It works in a series of periodization sometimes, right? It's people often talk about balance. You've got to balance all these things all the time, right in the moment, and not thinking about life over a longer, frame of reference of time, going, hey, I'm going to spend more time here at one point and more time here at another. And then it's, I think it's useful to think about things in a grander scheme.
Spoken like a true athlete. Periodization. It's perfect. Yeah.
But, I was thinking about the surfing, and I was wondering, is that your, these days, is that your place where you would go to find your peace, or is it still that place to test the extremes and be in discomfort, or, a little of both? What does that look like? I mean, we're going to get into FOPO and all the, everything, but I just,
for sure. It is both. It's, and sometimes it depends on my mood, and sometimes it depends on the environment. And so I'll explain what I mean is that most of my life is pretty high octane. And so when I can get into the ocean, and Mother Nature will allow, it's a bit of a sanctuary. When I was really young, one of my mentors said it was my altar, which was, I always had this kind of reaction to what do you, that almost sounds blasphemous. What do you mean? Now I really understand it. It's a place to be connected. And however, sometimes Mother Nature has different plans, and it's on. And you need every faculty that you can possibly have, and hope that you have developed to be able to meet the demands of that moment. And sometimes it's heavy, but most of the time it's not. Most of the times it's playful.
Yeah.
And I'm not traveling much anymore for surfing, so it's whatever in my backyard, and it's not a heavy place where I'm living.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I anticipated that was the case, but it's I wanted to not have my own perspectives on assumptions. And
is the platform the same way for you? Is it sometimes it's a place to go find some edges, and it's some place just to go turn everything off and move?
Good question. Well, one, I don't step on the platform anymore. I think when we spoke last, I had completed my 1,000-pound squat. And
you did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I was in this transition of how do I find my space in lifting and not chasing big things. I'm not willing to do what it's going to take from a, physiological manner, the drugs, the training, just the massive, this is people 100%. You work with, right? And I was just lifting weights, not doing real things, but I say that self-deprecating, which I think you address in your book, but
Yeah.
but
Yeah, no kidding. You're lifting heavy weights,
but
very heavy weights.
that was an interesting ride trying to find that, like, I enjoy being in the moment and feeling this space. And so I went to, I spent a year not even lifting heavy at all, just to really force myself to make that transition. And it's something I'd mentally prepared on for years. And so I constantly did have like tons of questions from people like, when are you doing the next thing? I still get it. And it's like, no, I am still chasing grand goals. But it's these other things. Like, it doesn't, I don't have to be attached to that. And we're getting ahead, but I really love where you speak about identity in your book and being, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but, around being a purpose-based identity. And I chose not to actually do an introduction here at the beginning of this. Normally I do an introduction, but you were speaking a lot to, you're not defined by the things that you do. And so I actually wanted you to do your own introduction of who is Michael Gervais. And yes, can you do that? Because I'm like, every introduction I would do would be around your accomplishments, all these things that are not necessarily you. They're outputs of your purpose, your identity, but they're not you.
How fun, Chris! Like, nobody's done that or done this, which speaks to your creativity for sure. I will. The best way I could describe myself is, without being too esoteric and weird about, like, the stuff we can't see that really defines us, right? You've got the internal and the external, and it's the internal stuff that you can't see that really is the makeup of who you are in so many ways, at least from a sports psychologist standpoint or a psychologist standpoint. So every day is an opportunity to create a living masterpiece. That is my guiding philosophy in life.
Wow.
So if you break that down just a little bit, you'll understand more about who I am. And I'm happy to do that in just a moment here. So first, every day, meaning that my job is to be here, to be connected today to my best abilities. I see life as an opportunity, not as a threat. Even though I think the world is dangerous, I see that my job in this dangerous world is to have the right requisite skills to be able to be balanced, and even on the front foot, center of mass, to be able to say, like, what's the opportunity that I'm presented with today, and what are the opportunities that I can create? So every day is an opportunity to create a living masterpiece. And then so the living masterpiece, well, the word create matters a lot. And I think that, it could be build, it could put a lot of words in there, but create is the word that really does something for me. And technically it's co-create, because I like doing it with other people or with Mother Nature, whatever. It really is co-create, but that it gets a little confusing for some folks, so I make it simple. And then a living masterpiece. So what is a living masterpiece? That's really what I'm dedicated my full life towards, is to understand how to co-create a living masterpiece. And for me, a living masterpiece has to do as much about getting up on the edge and being artistic when you're at that edge as it does to being at home with myself wherever I am. So there's the yin and yang between those two that I find fascinating. And so you and I have an opportunity right now to co-create a living masterpiece. And so my job in this moment, now I'm defining, or I'm explaining myself to you and your audience still. My job in this moment is to be fully present, to be at home with myself, to create as much inner space as I possibly can so that I can eloquently adjust and share from an honest place how I understand myself and how I understand the world, both what I've studied formally and informally. So that's pretty much what it is. Now, by trade, this is the part that makes it really concrete. I am a applied scientist, so I'm an applied sports psychologist, and I take best practices in the world of psychology to help those that are fundamentally wanting to pursue their very best on a consistent basis. They tend to be best in the world, but they don't have to be. They do need to have that fundamental commitment to be their very best. And that's how I spend most of my time.
Wow. All right, guys, we talk a lot about mental resilience on this podcast, but let's talk about another type of resilience. That's movement resilience. We want to move well, recover better, and do it for life. And it starts with your feet. And you can start today with Naboso. Naboso is a sensory technology company founded by a functional podiatrist. And all their products feature a texture to stimulate, strengthen, and awaken your feet. I use their splay toe spacers and Neuroball to release my feet at the end of every day. They also have these textured recovery socks that feel like a mini massage when you walk around. If you're looking for an effective way to bulletproof your feet, head to naboso.com. That's NABOSO.com and use code RESILIENCE for 20% off. I love that. I'm glad I asked that in that way. There's so much. Cool, there's so much to unpack in there. God, I hate the unpack word, but
I like it. You don't like it?
Well, I do like it, but it gets used so much, I guess. Well, for good reason. So. But that has me thinking about your book in general. You just packed in that statement so many different pieces that if someone goes back and listens to that a few different times, there's a lot in there. And just like your book, The First Rule of Mastery, like you just dive deep and hard with just powerful, hard-hitting stuff. There's a lot of people who make, a 16-hour long book and it's like got a half hour's worth of stuff. And yours is just... I loved how clean and concise and clear it was.
Oh, thank you.
And
that means a lot, Chris. Like really coming from your mind and what you've been able to do, and like that means a lot. So thank you.
Yeah, I like that first 2 chapters in there. I mean, I was just like, this is like more content than I highly recommend. This is one of my favorite books I've read in a few years, and
so
I just want to
make
that clear. And so we are going to talk about the point of this of changing your relationship with people's opinions or your perceived people's opinions of yourself. But I'd like to know, because in there you talked about the yin and the yang and your informal research in other areas. And I'm wondering where your interest in like the Eastern philosophy and mindfulness and all of that. In your book, you talked about being introduced to stoicism, while you were going through school for psychology, but I didn't pick up, and maybe you did and I just missed it, where some of those other practices came from, where they came from before that, during that, after. I've got a particular interest. I've got an interesting mix of that myself. I was interested. My dad spent 3 years in the monks in Tibet and in the monasteries, and I was taught a lot of meditative practices and things within that realm and introduced very young in my life. And I see a lot of that, but it's not, you're still very clear on here's what the research is. Here's how we apply this, but I can feel the mix of that distinctly in your writings, even though it may not be apparent to a lot of people. So
that's really cool. Yeah. I wrote it in a way too. Well, let me answer in order. Is that Stoicism, I was first introduced to Stoicism in like 1992, and I was like, this is awesome. And right around that same time, I was introduced to, it was an intro course to all 11 world religions, right? So one of those intro to, religion or something. And I thought, oh goodness, like there's a lot here, because I was spoon-fed Catholic. And I was like, holy moly, like look at these incredible thinkers. And Lao Tzu and Confucius and Dalai Lama and Buddha and I was like, this is amazing. So that's where like the first percolation took place. And that's not that important because it just kind of laid in the background for me. And then I got to graduate school. I got to my PhD program, and my what was his title? I think he was a vice president or dean of the psychology school, was a Vietnam vet. And he came back from war pretty screwed up. and Dr. Walt Rutherford is his name. And he came back and he thought he was fine. He thought he was doing okay. This is how he explained it, his transition back. He thought he was doing just fine. But he was irritated and frustrated, and like he just was unsettled. And he was holding on to the image and the personality that he had developed at combat, and couldn't quite figure out how to fit in the civilian life back in the States, which is a common story. That is very common, yeah, even in modern times now. And then he got introduced to Tibetan psychology, and then he got introduced to the Tibetan practices of Buddhism, and he completely flipped his way. And so what I ended up meeting was the dean vice president of school that was an ex-Vietnam warrior, Tibetan psychologist. And he never spoke about what he was doing, but the way that he would show up and present was compelling. There was just a deep draw to the depth he had, the pain that he had faced, the liberation that he's expressing in the present moment. And he and I just spent a lot of time. And I didn't realize that the first 15 minutes of every class, we were meditating. And he didn't call it meditation. I didn't know what it was. This is how kind of green I was. What years was this? This is like in year 2000. I didn't even realize that we were meditating. But he was walking us through kind of different types of meditation. And sometimes they're 5 minutes, sometimes they're longer. And at the end of the class, he was like, he pulled me aside. He's like, I never thought you'd enjoy meditation. I go, what? so that was 24 years ago. And that's how it happened. He kind of tricked. There's only 3 kids in the class. Like this, there are 3 students in the class. PhD programs, as you know, are small. And he thought that he needed to trick me into it because I'm kind of fidgety and skeptical and critical, and like I want to take a hard line and look to really understand something. I'm less that now. I'm way more open than I was 24 years ago. And so he didn't say what it was, and he just kind of tricked me into it. Come to find out, I love it. And that was the first entry, the real entry into some of the mystic practices.
Man, I love that. Your description though of him in the moment, like the liberation, the draw, the experiences, like as you're speaking, I'm thinking of my father and like many of the, the Buddhists that he introduced me to is they radiate this, I'm okay and I'm with you. And there's just this presence this deep presence with people that have spent time with that is just incredible to be around. And it's an interesting experience. I can see how that draw you in. My experience is almost the opposite. So I had early experiences, to Buddhism and, from, I don't know, very young age, but early 80s. And then in the late 90s or 2000s, people started bringing up, early 2000s, so 24 years ago, people started bringing up to me like, I was getting things written about me in local newspapers and throwing. I'd share my beliefs on things, even in my piece in high school in the mid 90s. I was very particular about my statements and what I said and my beliefs, and people started going like, wow, you're a stoic. How much of stoicism philosophy have you read? And I'm like, what is that? But it kept coming up. People kept saying it to me. Yep. And I'm like, I better look into this. And then I started reading through Stoicism, like, oh, okay, I see where people are coming from with their questions around.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about the commitment to mastery, well, let's just talk about something that I would consider substandard to mastery, which is high performance, which is, there's no judgment in it, but it is not the same. It has a different contour. The path in the life of high performance has a very different shape and contour than the path of mastery. And controlling what you can control, which is kind of tier 0 for Stoicism, or mastering what's in your control, that commitment is fundamental to the high performing, modern life. And so it's also been part of mastery for the ages. So that's where stoicism lays over so well into the high performance lifestyles and the high performance commitments and environments. But so you could see why there would be some interest,
Yeah,
for sure.
With that though, there's some contrast, because it's not like if you're a high performance, you're necessarily adhere to a stoic philosophy. Obviously, most people haven't necessarily researched, although it's very common now for people to be aware of what stoicism is. Over the last 10 years, 5 years particularly, has become very popular in the medium. But we also, it seems like in high performers, there's a lot of people that haven't dealt with themselves or the things, because those are the drivers. And I can't tell you that that's not like, for me personally, like to say, okay, I have to beat everybody physically. I have to beat everybody in business. I have to beat everybody in, in mental, like, where does that come from? That probably doesn't come from a place of I'm okay with myself, right? I mean, let's just be clear, right?
Oh, well, yeah.
And I'm
really
becoming okay with that now. Like, this is in my life, I'm getting closer to 50 now, and I'm understanding this, and I'm like, I don't have to win everything, right? But yeah, being, some of those fundamental things with stoicism aren't necessarily all high performers.
No, yeah, the articulation there is really clear, because just enough anxiety, just enough OCD, just enough narcissism, where it's not completely quote unquote crazy making, is some of the stuff that sits right underneath people that are extraordinary at what they do, but very unsettled with who they are. And so that's the difference between a performance-based identity and a purpose-based identity, back to our original point. And to do really well in any high-speed, exacting environment, there is a full commitment to control what's in your control, to master what's in your control. So high-speed, exacting environments will force your attention right down into the basic elements of focus on this task right now. And there's no time, literally, in exacting environments. That's why I was so inspired by and connected to those environments. There is no luxury of the wandering mind. And so it is a forcing function to be all in right now, or like you feel the pain of consequences. And they're not, some are binary, you survive or you don't, and others are a little more forgiving. And so that's where when I was speaking about the controllables, I was more about like the commitment in high speed, agile, exacting environments as a forcing function, that I don't think any high performer would say, what do you mean be in the present moment? What do you mean be fully focused? What do you mean? But then there's that other part, to your point, which is like, well, I'm doing that in service of being the best, as opposed to where some of our ancestry, our common ancestry friends would say, wait, the best or your best? Like that, right? Which one are you really doing?
Yeah.
Are you using this philosophy in service for some external secondary gain? Oh, well, you've just butchered everything that I thought was true. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, so purpose-based identity, who you are, and you stated that in your intro. What are your beliefs, values, and talents? And differentiating that from the FOPO, this fear of other people's opinions. I think you articulated this so well. I'm going to hit on some phrases I just freaking absolutely love. Oh, cool. But it's trading authenticity for approval. It's trading to have power versus purpose. It's trading the dreams of other people. And this is one I hit on all the time. And actually seeing in your text, I was just like, oh, I love this. But trading other people's dreams for your own. And then, because you see this all the time, we are so influenced by the expectations of our family, the teachers, the community, like all these things of what I need to be and how I need to present in the world. And there's so many vast ways that I think that the creativity of the way that you can create your life today is so much. And this is what I try to empower my kids with so much, is like just showing them, not teaching them, but just showing them that you can live any way that you choose to live. And my mother showed me that, not in a great way, but in a powerful way. And, you know, my wife, she cooks barbecue at home for a living, like, you know, for the internet. Like, that's like, because she wants to teach people and inspire women to get behind a grill. Like, but.
Oh, wait, I got to follow. I didn't know that that's what she's doing.
So she.
Yeah.
I'll send you. She does
link?
amazing. She hasn't been doing as much over this last summer, but she was on the competition show Fire Masters. And I think she was going to be on Barbecue Brawl. But yeah, she's she's a Kansas City barbecue certified judge. And like I said, you can find her on Food Network and the Cooking Channel. And then she does work with a lot of the big barbecue brands out there. But she does amazing, phenomenal cuisine. People are always like, how do you stay so lean with that food? Her page will just blow you up. So.
Oh, cool.
So it's all, you'll love this.
Wait.
Actually, just a quick tangent before I actually ask you a question again. But she tries to show people that you can eat amazing and still eat good quality food. Like, and it's not hard. It's not a 50 million. You don't have to be a chef, but tasting food, good tasting food is accessible, easy to create, and is not unhealthy. And that in our sports world is a common misconception, I think, of a lot of people that want to do chicken and broccoli and so on. Like they put it in this dichotomy of relationships. So I think it's an important thing. So sorry.
Oh, good. Yeah. I'm stoked to check her out.
So, and then the last one with that, hustle for self. We're out there hustling for self-worth. So those are my things. Like I picked up on those phrases from your piece around the FOPO and identity. And I'd love to have you define a little bit more about this, purpose-based identity. Flesh that out a little bit more, and self-awareness, because I want to tie back to something that you just mentioned around narcissism and some questions I have as it relates to that and self-awareness. So,
Sounds good. Yeah. So let's just start like upstream for a moment about FOPO and kind of how our brain works. So FOPO, fear of people's opinions, I think is one of the greatest constrictors of people's potential. And a bunch of my friends, when I didn't tell people I was writing a book. And what happened is I wrote a 3-page article for Harvard Business Review. And they called 12 months later and they said, well, you touched a nerve. You were the #1 downloaded article 12 months in a row. Like, wow, can you please,
that's
backfill this thing? Yeah, right. It was really cool. And in that article, I use that phraseology that FOPO, fear of people's opinions, is one of the greatest constrictors of human potential. And what I mean by that is that our brain is designed to scan the world for danger, for threat. There's this gift that was passed on to us to help us stay alive. And that gift is the programming of our brain to do what I just said. Now, if left unchecked, our brain is constantly finding the threat. One of the greatest threats that we don't talk about, we understand the wildebeest and the saber-tooth and the warring tribes are all threats. But one of the threats we don't talk about is that 200,000 years ago, if you and I were doing something, we're responsible for hunting, gathering, sharpening, arrows, whatever it might have been. And we're blowing it. Chris and Mike were blowing it. That if you come back to the, empty-handed, if you will, from the frontier, no food, the first time the elders would be like, look, okay, listen, you got to do better, right? Like, you got to take this seriously. Like that, there's kids here that are hungry now. And so get your ass out there tomorrow. I know you're tired, but get back out there. And let's say we come back empty-handed again. Sure enough, if too many times like that would take place, the elders would get together and say, look, Chris, Mike, you're relegated. You guys are no longer, you're not responsible. You're not performing. You're not taking care of business. We can't count on you. So now you're relegated to this other duty. And if we blow it there, then we might be relegated outside of the community, outside of the tribe. So our brain is hardwired to scan the eyeballs of other people's to see if we are being approved of or rejected by. And because rejection 200,000 years ago was a near death sentence. Okay. So it's real. That's why it doesn't make sense, in modern times that public speaking is one of the greatest fears for humans. It makes no sense. You're walking most of the time, you're in an indoor setting. There's no elements of Mother Nature that are dangerous or threatening. The wildebeests are not inside. It's colleagues and friends and people that want to listen, or if it's a relatively hostile environment, you're quote unquote the one that has studied it more than just about anyone else in the room. And if you're in front of a very learned environment, then maybe have a discussion where you can learn. And so it makes no sense why we're so terrified of public speaking, other than the eyeballs of other people's, the potential rejection that comes from other people is a radical threat 200,000 years ago, and it's still showing up in modern times, but we haven't done anything about it.
Yeah.
So let me drill down. Our brains are wired to fear the opinions and the critique and the judgment of other people. We are wired for that. And let me pull this thread right around this conversation. As my friends, when I released the book, they said, "What? That's your subtitle?" Because it was, they fully thought the first rule of mastery was good. Like, that's clever. Like, okay, I get it, Mike. That fits for you. Based on what you've done with your life and who you've studied and where you've been, makes sense. But that, stop worrying about what other people think. Like, really? And so I think if I was to say the first rule of health would be stop drinking the poison that you're drinking every day, you'd say, yeah, that's a good rule. That's a good rule. The poison that we are drinking every day from a human potential standpoint is scanning the world to see if we're okay, is outsourcing our identity, is outsourcing our sense of self to other people, is looking for the approval of others. And this started very young. This started when you had wide eyes and you were looking up at your parents and, the quote unquote powerful people in the neighborhood or on TV or whatever about what is okay, what's good, what's revered, what's respected, what's approved. And so it starts at a young age when we are conditioned to look outside of ourselves to see if we're okay, to see if we're part of or being accepted by the tribe. And as a rite of passage into adulthood, those rites of passage are less clear than they've ever been. And so one of those rites of passage is to know who you are. 200,000 years ago, they would go into the wilderness and come back, with like the horns of something or the claw of whatever. And they're like, yeah. And the elders would say, to do that, to wrestle the bear down and to be able to, bring back, food for everybody, like that's a man we can, that's an adult we can rely on. That's no longer the case now. So what I'm just pointing to now, Chris, is
unless you
know who
go
you are.
Discover the extremes yourself in a purposeful manner, like pushing the limits and discovering that when you're early in doing the extremes on your surfboard, or not to get out too tangential, but it's what's coming to my mind.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. And even that, like there was an organic part where I loved it, but it was also, early on, I was good at it, and I put good in air quotes. But I was good at it, so I had a place that I could fit in, and then it became almost unhealthy. Maybe not that dissimilar to yours. Like I would imagine that you were one of the stronger kids.
Yep.
Like it made sense when you could put weight over your head, and you're like, look, I'm pretty good at this. And then as you invest in that more, there's more attention to you about it. And that's where it's so natural for us to develop by default a performance-based identity. Yeah. So we are in a performance-obsessed culture. And so by default, our identity becomes how good we're able to do something, how well we're able to do something. And then, of course, the next extension is how well is measured by how poorly the person next to me is doing it. Right? So it's a comparison model. I'm good when I'm as good or just about as good or better than you. But if there's a big delta between my skills, my performance, and yours, I don't feel very good.
Yeah.
And so I like, and that is.
And if you chase that too, like
part of
when you're in it and you're good, like the bar's always raised. It doesn't like you don't ever hit a point where it's just like the expectations of what you think other people are thinking about you are always there, and those stakes just get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Like it.
Yeah, for sure. And there's I hear parents all the time say, somebody in Idaho, or, if they're on the coast here in California, somebody in Idaho is in the gym right now. What are you doing? You're on TV. You're watching this, that, and the other. Like, that idea of like is so common that somebody else is hustling harder. By the way, I think that hustle hard mentality is completely flawed.
I hate it.
Oh,
there's
good. Yeah.
There's some really great podcast guest people that are people always tell me you need to get XX. I'm not going to name names, but like I just don't want to have. Obviously I pushed hard and done it in a healthy manner, but like there's a big difference between like helping people try to understand their purpose and why they're doing the things that they can do so that they can have the motivation and the passion to chase it versus this hustle grind mentality that is going to drive people into the ground, burning the candle constantly, all ends, like is just ridiculous. And people love it. They love to see it and hear it. It's this. It's a porn. Like it's just like porn. Yep. I call it hustle porn. I think I don't think I'm the only person that uses that term, but like, yeah.
It's good. But there's so much energy around anxiety. So if you think about two of the largest ailments from a psychological mental health perspective, anxiety and depression. So anxiety has lots of energy underneath of it. It's I'm so unsettled. I need to go and do, and I need to da. So that's an anxiousness. A busy mind, can lead to a busy body. And depression on the other side of the same coin, different side, is, there's a melancholy, there's a sombrance, there's a heaviness to it. It's like I'm walking through quicksand, and it just feels like that over and over again. So we're not going to point to that. Like that's not, by the way, nobody wants either of them, but if you're going to fall on one side or the other, in this modern life performance approach to whatever, you'd want to fall on the narrative of anxiety. All that being said is the anxious people oftentimes lose the sensitivities that a depressed person can bring forward. And hopefully we're not either. We're working from a very thoughtful place to be more present and to bring forward the skills, the psychological skills that allow you to be here right now without judgment, critique, without pulling on the past traumas, and you can be right in the unfolding, unpredictable unknown, which is a very difficult thing to do.
Let's talk about maximizing your strength and resilience. When chasing my 1,000-pound squat, I made my own supplements out of necessity to help push my body to its physical limits. So I founded Build Fast Formula because I needed supplements that actually worked every time I trained. All our formulas are backed by peer-reviewed research and third-party informed sport tested for quality and safety. Listeners can get 10% off by using code RESILIENCE at buildfastformula.com. That's code RESILIENCE for 10% off everything at buildfastformula.com. Find your formula and feel your physicality today. And you do a great job of explaining how to use FOPO as a driver for that. So learning to lean into discovery, and like I used to talk about this when I was a business leader, but like those challenging conversations, when you get that pit in your gut turning, like that means you need to go step into it, because they may not, changing jobs, confront like all these things may not end up a good outcome, but it will be a good outcome because you'll learn about yourself, you'll grow, you'll get comfortable. So I'd love for you to talk more about like, how do you use FOPO to grow? Because it's there for a reason, just the social connection as human beings. And I think that's where, for our audience, I'm jumping a little bit, but this is the Taoism side of it, is like, this is what creates the connectivity of like, we're social beings. But let's dive into, how do we use FOPO? Like,
well, it's a bit of an alarm bell. And so when you recognize you've got either psychological or physiological responses to FOPO, then it's an opportunity to do something with it. So the first rule here really is about awareness, is to become aware of FOPO and your response to it. So if you can agree with the narrative that we're programmed to scan the world for danger, and one of the most under-celebrated dangers is the judgment of other people, you go, yeah, okay, I get that. Then the next time that you are choosing a shirt to wear, or you're walking up 3 steps to get to somebody's house for a holiday party, or you're about to walk on stage, or you open the room to go to a boardroom and you're going to present something, or you've got an idea that you want to share, and you're feeling all of that activation. You're feeling a pit in your stomach. That's a physiological responses, or a light sweat, or a little bit of a unsettled tremor. Any of those types of mechanisms that feel a little bit too much. So a little bit of switched onness, that's cool. That's about readiness. But when it spills over, it's kind of like, from a physiological standpoint, the porridge is either too cold, just right, or too hot. And so we're talking about the too hot when you've got too much butterflies, when you've got too much activation in your system. It could be because of FOPO, or it could be that you don't have the psychological skills to respond to the readiness that your body is wanting to have for a particular moment. Our bodies are designed to get ready when we deem something to be important. And walking on stage apparently is very important for the majority of people. And so your body ought to turn on. It ought to activate so that it helps with the cognition and being sharp with your thoughts. So if you don't know how to manage that, and the porridge goes from just right to too much, then it might be FOPO, but it also might be psychological skills to invest in, like breathing, like self-talk, like having a pre-performance routine to help you settle in. And there's a whole handful of those skills. So the first is recognizing the physiological bits and say, wait a minute, why am I switched on? These are people I know. Why am I switched on? This is a party where, I'm now concerned about how people are going to think of me, as opposed to enjoying the conversation with other people. Okay, we could go on and on with potential narratives. The other is the psychological aspect, which is you just feel a racing mind. When your mind is spinning and trying to solve, and it's getting ahead of itself, and what if, and you're choosing your whatever out of your closet, your sweater.
I hate that. the spinning
I
what
have
ifs.
A uniform. The spinning what ifs. Okay, yeah. Well, that's like it's the slide on ramp to anxiety. What if this? What if that? And it doesn't mean that if you are planning ahead and thinking about all the things that could go wrong, that you are anxious. Because that's a good activity. It is a smart, good activity to think about all the things that could go sideways, to have a plan for it. But if you keep ruminating and you keep entertaining that narrative, that's where we start to slide into some anxiousness. So those are the two physiological triggers, that we talked about, and psychological rumination. And once you become aware of those two, you can look at the tripwire for them. And usually that tripwire is, am I going to be okay in the eyes of other people?
Yeah. But there's the point of like using that as a trigger to turn inward, not focusing on the other person's opinions.
Oh, that's well said. Yeah.
How do I meditate into myself to understand and grow from this experience using that trigger? That's a trigger. I've got the awareness. Okay, it's flipped, but I'm flipping. What about me? And it's a great opportunity for that self-discovery. It's it's being on that big wave out there that's, and no one's around to it's one of those self-discovery moments, right?
That's it. And that's one of the reasons I wasn't able to follow my dream. And that's why eventually I got into the field of sports psychology, is because I could do it, Chris, in a big, heavy, consequential wave when nobody was looking, or when there was just a few people that were out in the lineup and it was heavy. And I was at home in those environments. But as soon as there was judges and friends, families, that were watching, and there was a score involved, and like I was being critiqued and compared to other people, I was a disaster. So that was the competitive environment. I just couldn't get it done. And I'm talking about like as a 15-year-old kid. So,
but you have, like, again, in the fact of you're bringing psychology, outside of the norm of, being, having these discussions, like, in a public manner. I'm not going to be the one to try to articulate that, but I use your surfing as an analogy for a lot of these things, when it could be chasing a job when everybody expects me to be a doctor and I want to be a mountain climber. Like it's.
I had the CEO on the Finding Mastery podcast. I had the CEO. You're in good company here. I had the CEO of Nike on as he was in between gigs. So he was the CEO of PayPal, and we had known each other. And I said, what are you going to do next? He said, boy, it's the question that I'm in right now. And this is John Donahoe. Anyone that wants to look up this conversation, it was amazing. We're in a restaurant, so it was kind of loud, but it was an amazing conversation. He says, I feel like I've got these golden handcuffs because the world is expecting me to go take another high-powered CEO job. And I think I just want to do photography. And like the idea that, wait, you're going to blow this esteemed career that you've built. You could go take the next big gig at whatever and put another 20 million in your bank account, and you want to go futz around with a camera and take some pictures. Like, what do you mean? Oh, that's cute. Oh, that's really nice, John. But that'll be a phase.
That'll be a phase. Yeah.
Like, okay, get it out of your system. He ended up going back into the hopper. He is the CEO of Nike right now, but he did take enough time, I think, to be able to explore and get to know himself, and which is awesome that he had the commitment to be able to do that. But so I'm double downing on your idea that to really get to know who you are, that is the life adventure. That's the big adventure. And we can do it hopefully in our intimate relationships. That is one of the secondary great gifts of an intimate, long, enduring relationship, is that they hold up a mirror. And sometimes we don't like what we see and feel, but they hold up a mirror to us that helps us either go deep or stay shallow. And if you can go just a little bit deeper, you end up being a better partner. This is why only 50% of marriages in the United States really make it. It's because it's so much easier to stay shallow. It's so much easier to blame the unsettledness that we feel inside on an external environmental or, environmental reason or a person. So much easier. It's probably why we've got this radical divide as well from a political standpoint, is that, most people want the same thing, but there's lots of ways to get after it. Mm-hmm. And we're not listening. We're blaming.
Yeah, and that's our opportunity to, like I said, turn inward and not try to shut those feelings down, right? We want to recognize the trigger on the outside, this external, but our inward, we want to meditate into it, not shut those triggers, because that's our opportunity. Like, why does that bother me? Why am I concerned about this? What is it about me that I can grow from? And this is, I wanted to call this out because when I was reading through your material, I was like, okay, well, this seems like, narcissists would be great at this because they're, not really affected by the fear of other people's opinions, but they're the ones that don't turn inward often either, right? So this 7% of the population that is, a little bit of a psychopath, narcissist, a number of traits, right? They're going to be great at, not focusing on FOPO, but that doesn't mean they're doing well in life because they're not social beings, right?
Yeah, like true NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, like true NPD is relatively rare. The 7% is like a substack of it where it's like the narcissistic tendencies.
Yes, it's sorry. So that's I can't remember which author I was reading on that. It was the one that he wrote the book with Oprah on on happiness.
Adam Grant.
Yes, Adam Grant. So
is that who did it? Yeah. So and so this book is not for narcissists. Flat out,
very clearly,
and it's not for the sociopaths, and it's not for the truly enlightened.
This is for that 50 people that want to they morally elevate the people around them. You want to inspire people to be better. You're like, this is very much that prop. And again, referring to Adam Grant, I think he's like 50% is the complete opposite of the, that dark triad, where again, like 93% are, good, wholesome people anyway. I'm talking
the dark triad. You're talking about
that
Machiavellianism.
Yes, Machiavellianism.
Machiavellianism, sociopathology, and narcissism.
Tendencies, right?
Yeah,
not clinical, full. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, true dark triad folks are very scary individuals. They're the assassins in modern life that don't feel anything. Like sociopaths, the challenge with sociopathology is they don't feel pain themselves. And so they're like, well, what are you talking about? Like I don't feel pain. Like, what do you mean that this is a problem for you, that I'm doing this? So they really have a disconnect between what pain feels like for themselves and what pain feels like for another person. So they do selfish base act because they don't really understand it. Narcissism, oddly enough, narcissism is really about the initial trauma in their life was so great that they non-consciously most of the time said, oh, well, I'm just going to get mine then. And so it is an inability to understand that the other person has their own life, because it's an all-consuming connection to what you need to get to be okay. And so narcissists are actually very fragile, and they are terrified of what somebody else thinks of them. But they've got all of this armor up that they don't actually get in touch with that feeling to be able to heal from it. So that's, the narcissists are actually very fragile people. Sociopaths are not.
Yeah. Yes.
That's one of the differences between the two.
Thank you for clarifying, because that's where I was struggling with some questions as I related. I was tangential in my thought process as I was reading through it, but that's where that came. Those questions.
Well, your intuition is great, Chris, because I had a whole chapter in there on narcissism and FOPO, and I pulled it out because it got a little too technical, and I wanted this to be a very applied, easy, easy to follow book with easy takeaways on how to get better at being at home with yourself just a bit more often.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, some of my interests, just my background, like I've met true sociopaths in my life, many, just because of the experiences, and also, those people that are kind of raised by someone with a lot of those tendencies ends up being a person that attracts those later in life. They're a people pleaser, and they're a target for, people of those tendencies. And that's been a learning lesson for me, why I've had so many amazing people in my life, but actually also a number of, very dangerous, individuals. So it's a learning experience, but, I think my audience knows my background. I'm literally talking about murders and serial killers and, like bad, true, psychopaths, which is unfortunate way to live. But that just made me lose my train of thought. My mind's all over the place.
No, it's good. Like life experiences that are heavy shape us. And there's some research that being in a abusive relationship for 6 months fundamentally changes the brain. And so just 6 months, is probably earlier, but they didn't kind of hook them up to fMRI, scanners earlier than 6 months. But remarkable what happens when we're in abusive relationships. And, like this, just pull it back to FOPO for a minute, is that at some respect, if we're not careful, our brain will win, and it will hold us back completely from living the good life. It's a powerful mechanism. It's operating in the background all the time. And until we address that this is a poison that we're drinking, which is the constant outsourcing and checking, if we're okay, like we end up, being something, spending the very fleeting amount of time on this planet, this remarkable planet, for the approval of other people. And that I need my community members to be their very best, because we're trying to get after something that is the good life is remarkable. It's wonderful. So to do that, we need to be at our very best, because the world is not set up for us to be our best. The world is set up, to try to figure out how to survive a very dangerous world around us. But we put our head down. That movie Don't Look Up is so good. We put our head down. We pay attention to the immediate tasks. We get home kind of tired. We're kind of shitty to the people that we love because, we're not really seen the way we'd like to be seen. We don't really see them the way they'd like to be seen. And, we just kind of stay on the surface and have a beer and, watch sports and just don't look up. Don't look at the real kind of things that are going on. And the corollary to don't look up is don't look in. Definitely don't look in. Because why would you do that? That psychology stuff is for weirdos. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah. Oh my God, it's the best. It's the best.
Well, your take home too around that 8th development cycle at the end of life. My mother's in the process of dying right now too. But what is the ailment? Heart failure, but it's 40 years of alcoholism. Yeah, she's
that's complicated, isn't it?
It is. It's really it's crazy challenging because I tried to talk her into having the heart surgery a year ago, and then when she found out that they said she had to quit drinking, she refused, saying, well, they're calling me an alcoholic, I'm not that, and so I'm not getting the heart surgery. And then she had a heart attack, and she was at home for a month, and finally it was like, okay, I need to go. And so she wasn't drinking for a month. So they're like, okay, we can do this surgery, because she was so ill she couldn't drink. They get in, and they couldn't even get into the heart. The valve was so closed with the wire. Like, they spent 4 hours trying. Whoa. And they're like, she's had heart since they've been wanting to do a surgery since she was 16 or 17, by the way. And she's 69. And so anyway, she's back home, but I talked to her yesterday, and she's like, oh, a couple of days ago she tried to have a beer. It made her sick, but now she figured out she can have wine. And so I'm like, I just can't.
It's so complicated.
I'm like, it's tough, but yeah.
As a person who's dedicated his life to health, and I'm talking about you and like performance, it actually makes sense, because you're like, listen, I've seen what unhealth looks like, and the choices of not caring, and the choices to choose that over attending to me. And I don't know if you have kids, but it makes perfect sense why you've gone to the extremes that you've gone to. Yeah. Makes perfect sense. My dad he just went through a triple bypass, and he's 72 years old. And for years, and so this is why I know the challenge here. For years, I'd be like, Dad, cheese, steak, and beer. You've got to do better. Like, your dad had a quadruple bypass when he was like 45. Like, I'm not doing that, Dad. I'm telling you, I'm not doing it that way. And he would say, oh, you're harden up. It's whatever. Like, I'm fine. Okay. So it's to me, it's hard to have a ton of empathy for people that don't take care of themselves. And I know that as a psychologist, empathy is not one of my strengths. I understand that it's no longer a blind spot, but I understand why, because I spent so much early on, I didn't realize how toxic it was to care about somebody's health when they don't care. So I see one client a month now. Most of my time is not spent individual. It's like one really interesting, really compelling person, and empathy is not what they get. They get a mirror, and they get a matter of factness, and they get understanding. But empathy and compassion are not the two places I go to. I will feel with them, but it's not empathy. Right. It is like, I am feeling with you, but this is because that's healthy. It's normal. It's natural. But I'm not doing it so you'll change. And I'm not doing it because any other reason other than that's what's called for in this moment. And so I don't know if you struggle with empathy with your mom or not, but it's something that has been hard for me.
It's a complicated relationship. So,
yeah, I remember you shared that earlier on our podcast. Yeah.
I love her, and she's made me a lot of what I am. So,
Yeah,
which
ditto.
is,
Yeah, I have the same.
So, which I guess is a natural statement for anyone.
Yeah, it's a natural statement. You know what's even trickier is like I look like my dad. So when I look in the mirror, I see him every day. And I know that the choices he makes are really unhealthy, and I'm very sad for him. And it's a weird thing to look and see the eyes of your parent, and I don't know if you look like your mom.
I do look
maybe.
just like my mom. Like,
yeah. So and I think about the way that I work through it is like my dad's a good man. He just made selfish choices. He's an addict as well. And so imagine though that your parent was a serial killer or, was in jail for rape and murder or whatever, and you look just like them. The amount of athletes that I've spent time with that say that, man, my dad's a POS, and every time I look in the mirror, I look just like him. That's why I go to the gym at 4:30. Yeah. That's why I get a second lift in. That's why I eat this, that, and the other, Pure Health, whatever, because like I can't afford. I already look like them. I already sound like them. I already have the same eye coloring as them. I can't afford to slip up because the trauma that I've experienced coming home this is one of the athletes I spent time with. I asked him, this was part of a selection process for an NFL team I worked with. And I asked the kid, college graduate, I said, what's the hardest thing you've been through? And he said, you would think it was what everybody knows my mom did to me. She tried to kill me with a 2x4 and nails, and she's in jail right now. She's getting out in 6 months. I can't wait to see her. I forgive my mom. But the hardest thing I've been through is coming home, not once, not twice, but 6 times with all my shit on the front lawn because mom was smoking crack and didn't pay the bills, and all our stuff was pushed out on the lawn. That's embarrassing, dude. I don't know if you can ever understand the life I've lived early. And I'm like, I cannot understand that. But that's the hardest thing I've been through. So, and when those folks look like their parents, on top of it, it is even trickier than we imagine.
Yeah, I could see that. Wow.
Isn't psychology fascinating?
Yes, it is.
I mean, honestly,
I absolutely love it.
Fascinating.
I love it. And I love the way you've taken a lot of this discussion and, the way that this is getting in common conversations that people have today. And it's so much better than, like you talked about the current self-help, or a lot of what's been in the self-help realm for a lot of time being so...
It's nauseating.
Yes. And so your work, Brene Brown's, Mark Manson, I think you mentioned both of them in there. There's several other, I think Adam's stuff is really great. I just really love these conversations coming out, and actually science behind it and supporting it as well is just absolutely fantastic. And, I'm just reflecting, I'm like thinking out loud. I was getting ready to close this, but you're talking about those, fear of other people's opinions and the growing up and the embarrassment. And I'm thinking, I really had to confront a lot of that from showing up at school with clothes that were way out of date, dirty. I smell because I haven't been able, it's too cold to step outside and shower in the snow with a pot of hot water.
That's right.
Those were, confronted with those fears with, statements and things early in my life.
Of course you were going to develop a performance-based identity. Yeah. Of course you were. Listen, don't look at me, but look how strong I am. Don't look at me, but look how great I am. Don't look at me, but look how much better I am. Yep. I'm good. Of course you would. Of course I had to focus. Mine was psychology, and yours was moving heavy weights at high velocity.
And it's taken me close to 50 years to really start to come to terms with a lot of those insecurities and get comfort in being okay with, I don't need to be that. I don't need to do that. I'm good with me.
that statement and the travel from a performance-based identity to a purpose-based identity might be one of the most radical things that a human can do. And so a purpose-based identity is quite simple. It's not look at me and look how good I am relative to other people. That's performance-based. Purpose-based is I just want to be part of something bigger than me. I want to contribute to something that matters to me. I want to be in it for the long haul. So there's this future orientation. That is radical. And all of the greats had that.
Yeah.
Mandela, Dr. King Jr., Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Buddha, Jesus, you name it. Like all of them had something bigger than themselves that mattered to them. It really mattered to them. And it was so big and so unwielding that it wasn't going to be solved today or by the end of the week. Like there's a future orientation to it. And if you follow that thinking to the 80-year study at Harvard, like what is the good life? Two things. They studied people for 80 years, just the average folk.
Yep.
You know, like what's the good life? And it falls to two things: relationships and purpose.
Yeah.
And really, if you resort those two or condense those two, it's like your connection to yourself and other people, and your connection to your purpose. You know, the bigger thing in life. And so, anyways, Chris, I appreciate you. I love how you show up.
It's been a great conversation. It just reflects me like this is why this signs and why I'm doing what I'm doing and why you're going to see the things and like that happen with me from the business standpoint in the future, because I really and passionately want to change, you know, the face of at least what I can have an impact on with the team. And I'm actually working on a merger right now, big merger of some integration of things to pull together a team that's going to hopefully change the face of health and fitness. And so really excited about that. But
that mad scientist mind of yours, get it. Put it to purpose.
You're going to see some mad science coming. It's but you got to have great people. So, the last piece, and that's where I was getting to for the last 10 minutes, I think, was related to that study and just that end of life, that 8 cycle, and what people find. Which is, I'd love you to just kind of touch on that for 30 seconds. That's a great place to close it. But the regrets.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the great regrets that people have is that they didn't live life on their terms. They, live life for the approval of others. And, that's a haunting fear for me. Is dying is not the fear I have. The fear that I live with is living a life that is falls far below what I am capable of contributing to. And so I wrote this book because I struggled with FOPO for so much of my life. I'm not immune to it. I still, work through it, but it's a gift that I can use now to say, oh, look, there's something happening inside of me that I'm just trying to look a certain part as opposed to be me. Thank you. Thank you for me being able to recognize this tripwire, to be able to settle into the present moment. Most people, unfortunately, don't do the work. And this is why I love people that are honest in their approach to life, are vulnerable enough to live a courageous attempt at being their very best. And in doing so, recognize the importance of being in relationships and community with other people, because nobody can do this thing alone. We need each other to be our very best on a regular basis. And that has nothing to do with the shiny metallic pop culture approach to excellence. Excellence is being at home with yourself wherever you are. And when you're there, you can see other people and help them be their very best. Now we've created a rising tide. Now we've created something where people, hopefully for the next generation, can live a little bit better than you and I have.
Man, preach. Thank you so much for sitting down with me on my meandering course of questions. There is so much more to unpack in Michael Gervais' book, The First Rule of Mastery. You need to go check it out. He reads it himself, which I got mad respect for people that do that.
Thank you. Yeah.
And there's a ton of valuable tools on your website, which is First Rule. I might have that wrong. You go ahead and
No.
tell me all the places where people should go. Take care of me.
I'll take care of you. Yeah. The best website for everything that we've got going on, the podcast, the book, we've got an online course of all the psychological skills to be your very best. And we have a FOPO assessment on there, no cost, to see if you've got some FOPO.
I've taken it.
It is. Oh, yeah. Have you? Okay, good. So the best website is findingmastery.com, and you bang around in there and you'll find all the good things that we just talked about. And of course, I hope you find us on social, Michael Gervais on all the social channels. And, we'd love to hear what how you see yourself in the FOPO world and how you're committing to mastery.
All right. Thank you so much. And we'll pass this along on all the socials and get that out to you when it's over. So, all right.
Appreciate you, Chris.